So the next speaker for today is Jaskaran Singh from Sri Venkateshwara College, University of Delhi. He's a BSc third year mathematics honors student. He attended level O in 2021 and a follow-up camp. His topic for today would be visualizing the consequences of the Archimedean property. Jaskaran, you can share your screen maybe.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Jaskaran Singh, a third year mathematics honors student from Sri Venkateshwara College, University of Delhi. I have attended MTTS Level O in 2021 and also attended the follow-up camp. Today, I'm going to talk about how can we visualize the Archimedean property and its consequences. The primary focus of the presentation would be on visualizing the proofs. Hence, I have omitted the textbook proofs on purpose. The interested viewer may try to write down the proofs later for better understanding. As in when you see this blue circle with a plus sign in it, you may give a pause to answer the question being asked or even try to figure out what can happen next. So I'll start with a quick recap of a few old definitions. Firstly, what is an upper bound of a set? Let A be a non-empty subset of R. We say that alpha is an upper bound of A if for all x in A, there exists an if for all x in A, x is less than alpha, right? What does this mean? This means that every element of A is at most alpha, and it is obviously on the left of alpha, right? And any such subset of R which is bounded, which has an upper bound, is called bounded above. Similarly, we can also define the bounded below subsets of R which have lower bounds. Now I will recall the definition of a least upper bound. Let A be a non-empty subset of R which is bounded above. I would like to mention, please pay attention on the hypothesis that it should be bounded above. So alpha is said to be the least upper bound of A if, number one, it is an upper bound of A, which is quite obvious. If alpha is not an upper bound of A, how can we talk about it being the least upper bound, right? Now, if I consider beta to be another upper bound of A, since upper bounds are not unique, I can consider beta to be another upper bound of A, then it would be at least alpha. This means that no real number less than alpha is an upper bound of A. What does this imply? This implies that for all epsilon greater than 0, there exists an x in A such that alpha minus epsilon is less than x is less than alpha, right? So these are the three conditions which help us define what is a LUB of a non-empty bounded above set. Analogously, you can also define the greatest lower bound or the GLB of the set, right? So now I will show you some non-empty subsets of R and we will try to figure out what's happening. Let A1 be the set of all real numbers which are less than -1. Okay, so this is the real line which has shaded portion of all the real numbers less than 1, and the bracket shows that it is an open set, right? So the other one is A2 being the set of all real numbers more than 1. Can you spot any difference between A1 and A2? I know that's an ambiguous question. You can spot various differences, but now can you spot a difference? Yes, A1 is clearly bounded above while A2 is bounded below, right? This leads us to the definition of the order completeness property of R. What is the order completeness property of R? It says that for every bounded above non-empty subset of R, there exists a unique real least upper bound. That means if a set is bounded above and non-empty, then there exists an alpha in R such that LUB of that set is equal to alpha. This is also called the LUB axiom. Now, analogously, you can also try to define the GLB axiom using quantifiers also. Why do we lay stress on the non-empty subsets of R? What if I take phi? Now, by definition of GLB and LUB, you know if it exists, then GLB is less than equal to LUB, right? But we also know that GLB and LUB of phi, that means GLB and LUB of non-empty sets, can be any real number. So by choice, I can even choose GLB to be more than LUB. So this makes the statement absurd because GLB cannot be more than LUB. Thus, the completeness property does not hold for empty sets. Hence, we define the order completeness property or the LUB axiom for non-empty subsets. Now we have known enough so that we can define the Archimedean property. What does Archimedean property basically say? You might find many statements related to it. We'll try to show that each of them are equivalent. The first one says that the set of natural numbers is not bounded above on real line. What does this imply using quantifiers? This implies that for all r in R, there exists a natural number n such that r is less than n. So basically, there is no real number larger than all the natural numbers. No. So can we try to plot the largest natural number on the real line? I'm inquisitive. I want to try to plot the natural number on real line. Let us see what will happen if we try to do it. Suppose this is the set of natural numbers and it ends here, right? And alpha is an upper bound. Clearly, alpha is an upper bound. That means it is bounded above and natural number set is non-empty. My instinct says that there will exist an LUB, right? So let beta be the LUB of natural numbers, if possible. I know it's not possible, but if possible, beta is LUB of natural numbers. What is the contradiction? I'll give you a hint. The beta minus epsilon will never be an upper bound of A by the third definition of by the third criteria of LUP, right? So if take epsilon not to be 1, then beta minus 1 will not be an upper bound. And there will exist an element, say m, more than beta minus 1. Since beta minus 1 is less than m, I add 1 to the inequality. We will get m plus 1 to be a natural number by the closure property of addition, but it is more than the LUB of a natural number. Isn't this absurd? That's why we cannot plot the largest natural number, and the definition of Archimedean property makes sense. Now we'll try to formulate some other equivalent forms of Archimedean property. Given any two xy being real numbers with x being positive, there always exists a natural number n such that y is less than nx. You may put r equal to y by x in the previous statement to prove this result. Now, if y is positive, then no matter how small x is, one of its integral multiple will ultimately exceed y. And if y is less than 0 or y is less than or equal to 0, then you may try to see that n equal to 1 works naturally. Because x is positive while y is non-positive. So obviously it would be on the left of x, right? Now another form says that if I try to put y equal to 1 in the previous inequality, then I will get a very useful result which says that no matter how small or how large positive real number x there is, we will always get a n in n such that 1 by n is less than x. For x being greater than 1, you can try to see that n equal to 1 works naturally. How? I'll give a pause. Okay, so if n is equal to 1, then 1 by n is equal to 1, and 1 is given to be less than x. So this works naturally, right? But if x is less than or equal to 1, then the Archimedean property guarantees that there will exist such n such that 1 by n is less than x. But again, my curious mind says, what if there is no such n for some x? Then what will happen? If I reciprocate this inequality, then I will find that 1 by x becomes an upper bound of n. Isn't this absurd? Thus, no matter how arbitrarily small a positive real number is, there will always be a natural number whose inverse would be less than it. Now we move towards the third and one important result, which will help us move ahead in the presentation. You must be familiar with this diagram. You have seen it a little earlier in the presentation. We used it to prove that the set of natural numbers is not bounded above, right? Now, what if I flip it? If I flip it, I will get something of this sort, like the set of negative natural numbers. Now, analogously, can we prove it that it is not bounded below? Yes, we can. It's just that we need to reverse the signs and the inequality would hold the same, right? And we will find another contradiction if we assume it to be not bound, if we assume it to be bounded below, right? So can we see that if we combine these two, we can extend the result to be extend the result for z? Yes, the set of integers is unbounded, both not bounded above and not bounded below, right? So what does this mean? This means that given any real number, we will get infinitely many integers more than x and infinitely many integers less than x, right? Now I observe that for all x in R, there exists an a comma b in Z, such that a is less than equal to x and x is less than b. It is quite obvious from the previous result, right? But now I make a stronger claim. I say that for all x in R, there exists a c in Z, such that it lies between two consecutive integers. That means it lies between c and c plus 1. Can this be true for all real numbers? Yes, but my curious mind again wants to ponder back and try to figure out why can't it be true. Now I'll define a set a sub x, which is set of all integers less than x, right? Now by the previous result, I know that it is non-empty. Why? Because z is unbounded. So infinitely many integers are on the left of x, right? And by the definition of the set itself, it is bounded above by x. My instinct triggers me to use the LUB axiom. Firstly, the set would look something like this, right? Because it is bounded above by x, then the x is on the right of the set. Now, coming back to the LUB axiom, it would mean that there exists an alpha in R such that alpha is LUB of AX, right? Which means every element in AX is less than or equal to alpha, and intuitively alpha would be at most x. It can't exceed x, right? You may think about that also. Now can we locate alpha plus 1? Where is alpha plus 1? Can it be less than x or more than x or equal to x? The intuition says that it would be more than x. Why is it so? You may think about that too. Because if alpha plus 1 is less than x, less than or equal to x, then it will also be in the set. And the element more than the LUB cannot be in the set, right? So can we conclude that for any x, such alpha is unique? Yes, we can. And we further call it to be the greatest integer less than x. And we denote it by floor x. Now that we have seen that for any real number, floor x is unique. Can we define it to be a function? Yes, we can. So I say f from R to Z is a function which is called the greatest integer function, which maps every real number x to floor x. Right? You may see on the number line how this works. It always maps it to an integer. And an interesting fact about floor x is that the distance between x and floor x is always strictly less than 1. So now I need to head towards the more important conclusion. So I consider two arbitrary real numbers, x and y, and without loss of generality, x is less than y, right? Now y minus x is positive. So by Archimedean property, there will exist a 1 by n which is less than y minus x. Or I can say that if I manipulate the inequality, then the distance between nx and ny is more than 1. Now, where is floor nx? It is obviously on the left of nx, right? But where is floor nx plus 1? Will it be on the right of ny or on the left of ny? You may give a pause to think about it. Then I'll give a hint.
Yeah, Jaskaran, you have 5 minutes.
Okay, sir. So if d is equal to 1 for nx, floor nx and floor nx plus 1, but d is equal to d is greater than 1 for nx and ny, isn't this a contradiction? You try to figure it out on a piece of paper and you'll find out that the first case holds. Hence, floor nx plus 1 lies between nx and ny. So we can formulate an inequality that nx is less than floor nx plus 1, which is less than ny. Now, if I divide the whole inequality by n, I get a rational number between x and y. Why is it rational? Because floor nx is an integer, and if we add 1 to it, again by the closure property, it would be an integer. So it is of the form m by p by q, where both are integers, right? So given any arbitrary real number x and y, we can find a rational number between them. So this makes us conclude that rationals are dense in R. Now we have talked about rationals. What about irrationals? Are they dense or not? Let us try to figure out. Since root 2 belongs to irrational number, if root 2 may exist, yeah. So by the previous result, if I consider a and b to be two real numbers such that a is less than b, so can't there be a rational number between a by root 2 and b by root 2? Yes, there exists r in q such that a by root 2 is less than r is less than b by root 2. Now again, I multiply root 2 the inequality. I get that for all AB in R, there exists a Z equal to R by root 2, which belongs to irrational numbers. Hence, any arbitrary real numbers have any two arbitrary real numbers have an irrational number between them. From this, I also conclude that irrational numbers are dense in R. Irrational numbers are also called rational complements, right? So both the sets are dense in R, and this is a very useful result. It is used in differential calculus, integral calculus, etc. Now, I would like to throw some light on some other applications of order completeness and Archimedean property of R. The number one says that for all epsilon in R plus, if mod x is less than epsilon, that means if mod x is less than every positive epsilon, then x is equal to 0. You may try to prove that as well. Now, if I define a family of intervals indexed by natural number, which says j sub n is equal to open interval 0, 1 by n, then by the Archimedean property, I can prove that the intersection of all such intervals, the arbitrary intersection of the intervals, gives us phi, that is empty set. And one of the most used result after one of the most useful result is that GLB of an open interval is A and LUB of an open interval is B, where the open interval is AB, right? And it should be a subset of R, which is obvious. Now we can also even show the existence of nth root of a non-negative real number using the order completeness property and Archimedean property. And the very famous sequence 1 by n converges to 0. How can we prove it? Again, try using Archimedean property. So I would like to conclude my talk by quoting Kumarasan sir that without the LUB axiom and Archimedean property, the structure of real analysis will collapse. I hope you appreciate that by now. Thank you. And you may ask any doubt if you have.
Yeah. Thanks, Jaskaran, for the nice talk. I hope this is very clear to everyone, the Archimedean property now. So, any questions? Jaskaran, can you again share your slide, the last?
Yes, sir. 1 second.
Yeah. You showed some applications, right? You can.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Chaitanya,
when we, yes,
Okay.
yeah, when we saw the dense property of irrationals in R, we are assuming that R is non-zero, right? Otherwise, root R will be zero, and that's rational.
Yeah, Jaskaran, is the question clear?
So sorry, sir. I couldn't unmute myself. I'll start again. Chaitanya, give me a second, please. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
Is my screen visible, sir?
Yeah, it's coming.
Okay. Yeah, Chaitanya, can you ask again? I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I was asking that when we saw the density of irrationals in R,
Yeah.
there we consider the number R, rational number R between a by root 2 and b by root 2. So there we are assuming that R is different from 0, right? Otherwise,
Yeah, right.
2R is again 0.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
All right.
since I know the result wasn't proven by them, but we intuitively know that they are dense in R, so we can assume it to be non-zero, right?
Yeah. Okay. Fine. Thank you.
Yeah, Jaskaran, what did you say about this existence of nth root of a non-negative real number? Can you repeat once? What was?
Sir, I said that using the order completeness property and Archimedean property and the density of rationals and irrationals, we can prove that the existence of nth root, there is an existence of nth root for any non-negative real number.
Right, right. So I guess the existence of root 2 was done in this level O camp, right?
Yeah.
You all did this. So a similar approach would work, or?
Yes, sir. A similar approach would work. But the thing is, we need to be cautious about the inequality we are considering when we do the binomial expansion, the part of binomial expansion. Binomial expansion with power 2 is easy. For root 2, that was quite easy. But if we consider any arbitrary natural number n, then we need to be cautious about the terms which we combine to take as a constant c by k. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Any other question?
I have a question. So when you prove that
Yeah.
for every real number x, there are these consecutive integers around x. Can you move to that slide?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So here, here you are taking this set. No, set of all. Anyway, you are taking this. Yes, yes. So you are taking this ax. No, and you are taking the
Yeah.
LUB of ax.
Yeah.
So why is that an integer? You are getting alpha as your LUB of ax, and you are saying alpha is the greatest integer, right? But why is that alpha an integer?
If alpha is not an integer, then there will be an immediate integer on the left of it, right? And then alpha is one of the upper bounds of the set. But that is not the case. That's why it has to be an integer. And if alpha is not an integer and there is an integer between alpha and x, then alpha cannot be the LUB, right?
Yes, yes, right. So that requires proof.
Yeah.
Maybe you didn't mention that. Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah. If there is no more questions, yeah. Thanks again, Jaskaran, for the nice talk.